Committee's YouTube channel named EAL Committee and on the DC Council website. We will examine the administration of the First Source program that is run by the Department of Employment Services. First Source was established in 1984 as a strategy to reduce unemployment by ensuring that DC residents receive priority consideration for new jobs created by local government, assisted projects, or contracts in both construction and non-construction industries. To date, the Department of Employment Services is actively executing 625 construction and 670 non-construction agreements, totaling, of course, 1,295 First Source agreements. Under the Workforce Intermediary Establishment and Reform of the First Source Amendment Act of 2011, all beneficiaries of contracts totaling $300,000 or more must enter into a First Source employment agreement with the Department of Employment Services. According to law, 51% of all new hires on any government-assisted project or contract between $300,000 and $5 million must be district residents. Moreover, on projects totaling $5 million or more, the beneficiaries must meet worker hour requirements in 4 categories. Categories are 1, journey worker hours 20%, apprentice hours 60%, skilled labor hours 51%, and common laborer hours 70%. We are invested in large-scale projects like the Capital One Arena renovation project, which in a study conducted by the city included the creation of 4,900 construction jobs and new career pathways and training for district residents. As we look forward to the development of the RFK Stadium, it's projected that approximately 14,000 construction jobs and 2,000 permanent jobs will be generated. As economic development accelerates across the city, investments in the district's workforce remain critical. It is critical that we all understand the value in preparing district residents for long-term employment, as it will strengthen our labor market and sustain economic growth and generate prosperity throughout the district and all of our neighborhoods. Therefore, at this time, I'm going to recognize any of my colleagues. Okay, we will solo until we're joined perhaps by 1 or 2. And I will now then thank you for allowing me my opening remarks, and we'll turn immediately to our public witnesses. And I believe all our public witnesses are online. Okay. All right. We'll start with Sydney Appy, who is president of Precision Wall Tech Incorporated. Then we'll hear from Matthew Telfu, who is the associate builders contractors Metro Washington representative. And then we will hear from Amelia Camella, who is the director of Wilkes Initiatives for Housing Policy Commissioner, who is representing the DC Policy Center. And when and if Tanya Barashi, the director of the Federal City Council Education and Workforce Initiative, she is here in person. We will start with you. Please join us at the witness table, Ms. Barashi. Thank you. Yes, I think we do. And you may begin when you're ready, and then we'll move immediately to those who are on virtual.
Great. All right. Good afternoon, Chairperson Bonds. My name is Tanya Baracci, and I'm the Director of the Education and Workforce Initiatives at the Federal City Council, or FC2. FC2 is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, member-based organization dedicated to advancing civic life in the nation's capital. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the First Source program. At FC2, we co-convene 2 industry-led sector partnerships with CityWorks DC in construction called DC Builds DC and hospitality. Employers in both partnerships are invested in hiring DC residents for good careers in their industries, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it is their business imperative. DC Builds DC is led by 38 active construction companies, general contractors and subcontractors, both union and merit. Estimates indicate there are only 1,400 construction workers in DC, which is not nearly enough to meet the industry demand or first source requirements. The program should be improved to help create careers for DC residents rather than incentivizing short-term jobs over long-term career building. To help address this challenge, DC Builds DC employers have identified opportunities to improve first source as it currently stands. We've shared these challenges and suggestions with Department of Employment Services leadership, and I will provide a high-level summary now. First, First Source is designed for jobs and not careers. There are not provisions to incentivize long-term career development, for example, recognizing employers that hire DC residents on out-of-city state projects or non-First Source projects in DC, or to promote residents internally. 2, the alternative plan process is opaque and limited. Since most projects cannot meet the First Source regulations as written, they enter into an alternative plan agreement with DOES. There's currently no published guidance framework or timeline for companies to reference when developing and submitting First Source alternative plans. According to industry leaders, alternative plans are frequently delayed or denied, not because contractors fail to act in good faith, but because expectations are unclear. 3, there's no list of industry standard training providers. Through alternative plans, companies can partner with pre-approved programs to develop a pipeline of talent. A list of approved providers or their approval process is not available in a publicly accessible format that companies can easily access. DC Builds DC employers believe in the spirit of the law and are committed to working with the DC government on this issue. Conversations with DOES Director Morris Hughes have been collaborative and solution-oriented, and leaders were invited to follow up with the recommendations. I have a full list of those recommendations, which employers submitted to DOES on March 20th, 2025, which can be entered into the record. I will share some of the key short-term and long-term recommendations now. In the short term, DC Builds DC letters recommend establishing a guidance framework and timeline for alternative plans. This framework would transparently signal to businesses what they need to do to achieve a successful alternative plan. We are thrilled to hear that Director Morris Hughes suggested this idea as a potential pilot during our January 2025 meeting. When an alternative plan successfully meets compliance requirements and hires DC residents into careers, it should be used as a model. A more predictable model will ensure that workforce investments are not ad hoc or by project, but long-term and sustainable. 2, in conjunction with recommendation 1, create a process to identify and expand the list of industry standard training providers. Industry and government should jointly develop an alternative approval mechanism for construction training providers to be First Source approved based on outcome data and a standardized rubric to create a more robust labor pipeline. Approved entities would receive support from the District of Columbia Jobs Trust Fund, but must adhere to strict oversight and performance requirements. 3, expand First Source applicability. The law as it currently stands does not recognize the complexity of careers in construction and how companies operate across the region. Employers should get credit for hiring, retaining, and promoting DC residents. Implement partial credit for working on regional projects or non-First Source DC projects with weighted credit for career promotions and housing incentives to help residents remain in DC and build stable long-term careers. This will ensure that DC residents are hired permanently into positions with a path to higher paying careers. Right now, some residents are hired on a short-term basis to fulfill requirements, limiting access to a stable income and wealth-building opportunities. 4, improve efficiency and transparency in compliance. Projects where multi-regulatory laws apply, such as First Source, PLA, and CBE agreements, make compliance complicated, and companies would appreciate a more streamlined approach. Companies have limited visibility into where their First Source applications are in the good faith report submission or alternative plan approval process. Increasing transparency and communication through the process would improve implementation. Currently, delays in reporting and subsequent final payments are negatively impacting CBEs and residents for whom these regulations were created to support. Long-term recommendations, in the long term, collaborate on building the construction talent pipeline. Having a sufficient population of qualified DC residents in specialized roles will take years of strategic coordination across industry, education, and workforce sectors. The city's workforce and economic development leadership should commit to engaging annually with the construction industry to review workforce trends, determine data needs, and identify pilots and solutions to continue to make positive progress in growing the workforce in top priority construction occupations. Establish long-term agreements with businesses. Informed by long-term recommendation number 1, businesses doing a lot of work in the district would be identified. These businesses would establish long-term agreements with DOES that would include goals for meeting first source requirements across all their projects. Programs and employer activity and creating opportunities for DC residents should be recognized and count as meeting a goal. 3, determine strategies for keeping DC residents in DC as their earnings increase. We've heard from employers that as their DC residents progress into more senior roles with higher salaries, they tend to move out of the city. As such, we suggest that the city look into this matter and jointly with industry, develop proposals to consider incentives for retaining construction workers in DC as needed. There's an incredible amount of opportunity to get this right for DC residents, especially with so many significant public construction projects, as you mentioned, happening in the city in the near future. Approaching first source and economic development from a collaborative mindset will ensure that DC residents benefit from robust careers in construction. DC Builds DC leaders are ready and eager to work with the DC government on this issue. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. You said a mouthful in a period of time allowed. Thank you for that. Now we will hear from our virtual witnesses. Okay, Sydney, is she on? Okay, Sydney Atlee, who is the president of Precision Wall Tech Incorporated. We'll hear from you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Okay, I didn't realize I was muted. Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Atlee. I am president of Precision Wall Tech, a Ward 8 based, 100% owned commercial and painting and wall covering contractor. We believe in the first source. Our company exists today in part because of DC's commitment to small businesses and disadvantaged business. We are deeply invested in hiring DC residents and building real careers. As it relates to Doe's first source law, I want to raise 2 critical issues. First, the $300,000 contract threshold has created a loophole that is being actively exploited in the construction industry. Under that current law, contracts under $300,000 are no longer subject to first source. This has led to 2 practices: breaking scopes into smaller packages to keep contracts under the threshold. Subcontractors with contracts above $300,000 limit themselves by saying and signing contracts saying they supply materials and supervision only, and therefore pushing the labor to second-tier subcontractors whose contracts under $300,000. These workers never hit Doe's radar. Oversight is left to the GC, and in practice, many of these lower-tiered firms operate in the shadows. This opens the door to wage theft, cash payments, and undocumented labor force. The worker is the first victim, but legitimate DC businesses are harmed as well. Second, we are seeing an increased reliance on alternative plans. They meet the requirements temporarily hiring DC residents on project-by-project basis, but those workers often have no future once the project ends. First source should not just create short-term jobs. It should create long-term careers. Alternate plans weaken the accountability and shift focuses away from the subcontractor who actually employs labor. Today, 32% of Precision's workforce are DC residents. We make an a real effort, but we compete against firms that bypass the system entirely through pass-through structures and alternative plans. Meanwhile, legitimate CBE companies carry the full weight of compliance, which includes registered apprenticeship programs, reporting, training, and W-2 payrolls. All of these things force us to lose competitive advantage as a CBE provider. We are not asking to excuse First Source. We are asking for a system that closes the $300,000 loophole, monitoring labor at the subcontractor level, limit misuse of alternative programs, and treat good faith employers as your partner. In closing, we must remove the opportunity to exploit the system and hold everyone at the same expectation. That is how we protect our workers, support our small businesses, and preserve the intent of First Source. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now we'll have an opportunity to hear from Matthew Telfu from the ABC Metro Washington group of contractors.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Bonds. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Bonds and members of the committee. My name is Matt Defoe. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at ABC Metro Washington, the voice for construction in the District of Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's roundtable on First Source program. I am pleased to present ABC Metro Washington's view on the Department of Employment Services, DOES, in particular the First Source program. Before I begin, I want to commend the dedicated professionals at DOES for their work towards our shared goal of creating opportunity for district residents. Over the past year, we have conducted quarterly meetings with key DOES staff to create an open dialogue about First Source and arrange webinars with staff to provide an overview on the district's wage theft law to our members. We have always found them to be personally responsive and professional, for which I want to say thank you, and thank you on behalf of ABC's more than 500 member companies. Some of my points, and you have my testimony, have already been made, especially about complaints and challenges. Through no fault of their own, First Source compliance is currently extremely challenging for construction firms in the city. The hiring thresholds, particularly for skilled labor, are nearly impossible to achieve in today's marketplace for labor. Considering that unemployment rates in the district at the close of 1983 and 2011, when the program was first started, and when it was last amended, were 8.5% and 9.9% respectively. This is significantly higher than the current district unemployment rate of 5.6%. and the current unemployment rate for construction workers, which stands at approximately 5%. The First Source law and its major revisions were literally enacted during a different era. So this is especially true for skilled labor. As one of our members put it, if you are apprenticeship or journeyman, you already have a job. That leaves firms in a difficult position. The second point is on workforce training arrangements. Fortunately, the current First Source law permits the mayor to waive the law's hiring and hour requirements. In recent years, DOES has begun taking advantage of this provision to great success in partnership with ABC's Construction Orientation Readiness Program called CORE. CORE has been in operation since 2008 and recently expanded to 10 weeks, offering even more valuable pre-employment job training demand by the construction industry. Participants are workers with the basic knowledge and skills needed for employment in the construction industry. The core program includes specialized instructions in the following areas: enhanced safety instruction, construction math, hand power tool operation, communication skills, and other areas. In regards to the first source reform, while the current first source law permits companies to use special workforce training arrangements in lieu of hiring an hours work requirement, there's no certainty that this option, which again is already part of the law, will be available to them, or what the specific requirements of their arrangements will be or so. So next, we urge the council or DOS to standardize the requirements of these agreements so that companies have certainty as what will be required of them before selecting this option. This will also create efficiencies within DOS. The first source law does not include minimum requirements or any requirements for a special workforce training or placements arrangement. As a result, any new agreement requires significant back and forth negotiations, and agreements can be different, from the project to project or company to company. These simple fixes to the current law will benefit many district residents, including those who are hard to employ and are the most in need of the basic employment skills. So in closing, certainty and standard agreements would be efficiently to any first source reform. In closing, I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for the seriousness of which you take these issues. I'm happy to respond to any questions or participate in any further of the committee's discussion. DOS has been great to work with. Our members, again, are engaged and fully committed to hire district residents in these areas. With that, Madam Chair, I want to thank you again, and I'll be here for any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And I think our last virtual witness is Amelia Kamla, who is with the DC Policy Center. There you are. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Bonds and members of the committee. My name is Amelia Kalma, and I'm the director of the Wilkes Initiative for Housing Policy at the DC Policy Center. We're an independent, nonpartisan think tank focused on policies that keep the district strong, vibrant, and compelling. And first source laws, while well-intentioned, are not currently producing workforce pipelines in the district. And while first source agreements are not limited to construction, this industry has had a particularly hard time filling positions, and so this is where I'll focus my testimony. Let me share some troubling numbers. Between January and June of 2024, there were 335 first source employment agreements executed for construction projects in the district. Unfortunately, this resulted in only 78 new jobs, only 41 of which went to DC residents, if we're assuming we're going by the average listed in the report, which is that 53% of jobs went to DC residents. This means that for every 8 first source agreements, only 1 DC resident was hired. This is not just disappointing, but this is a policy that's not working. And the core problem is straightforward. DC doesn't have enough qualified residents to meet first source requirements right now. Of the 15,200 construction workers employed in DC in 2022, only 9% lived in the district, and the rest commute in from Maryland and Virginia. We're trying to fill jobs from a talent pool that just doesn't exist yet. So what can we do about this? We could standardize alternative workforce plans. Right now, when companies can't meet hiring requirements, they negotiate alternative plans on a case-by-case basis, and this creates inconsistency and confusion. Instead, we could establish clear frameworks that require meaningful investments in workforce development, supporting construction programs in DC high schools, sponsoring residents through certified training programs, or funding registered apprenticeships. These shouldn't be exemptions. They should be reliable pipelines into construction jobs. Second, we need more transparency. Employers are frustrated by the opaque approval process for alternative plans, and publishing standard requirements, review criteria, and decision timelines would reduce uncertainty and help channel resources where they're needed most. And third, and most importantly, we need a long-term workforce planning. So DC agencies should conduct annual analyses to identify which skilled trades lack adequate pools of qualified residents. And this data can serve multiple purposes. It can allow us to adjust first source requirements to match the reality, and it would direct training programs towards the trades where we most need to grow our workforce. With clearer projections of multi-year hiring needs, we can design training that matches market demand. We can recruit residents for specific available jobs rather than providing generic training. And we can prioritize recruitment among underrepresented groups, such as people of color, women, and returning citizens who face big barriers to construction careers. First Source has been on the books since 1984, and 40 years is a long time. And I think we just have to recognize that this policy, while well-intentioned, isn't currently working. It's time to transform First Source from a compliance checkbox into a real economic development strategy that builds opportunity for DC residents. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the entire panel. You have put on the scale some of the issues that I believe our agency is very much aware of. There's been much discussion about the alternative plans and how the alternative plans have become a way of holding particularly the construction community to a standard. But I want to remind our witnesses that the First Source program is about the letting of any government dollars, whether it's construction or non-construction. And so there are so many opportunities that are floating in the community. But today we'll talk a lot about construction because I think our public witnesses have zeroed in on that. I would like to start, if I could, to just digest a little more when we talk about one of the long-term recommendations. And we acknowledge that the First Source program has been around for a few decades, that times have changed. And when we think about construction, there was one issue that is prevalent almost always. How do we build a construction talent pipeline? And one of the suggestions was that the government should commit to engaging annually with the construction industry to review workforce trends, determine data needs, identify pilots and solutions to continue to make positive progress in growing the workforce. And this we have from Federal City Council. And so when we talk about this, are you aware, Federal City Council, that some of these perspectives the agency is already engaged in, such as workforce trends and determining what may be the needs of this industry? Just wondered if you would expound on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're aware of a lot of the efforts that are taking place. The Workforce Investment Council is always publishing really great data as well. I think where there is room for improvement, and I think that this is something employers also hold themselves to account for, is thinking about economic development and these different areas in a collective mindset. So great, we have the numbers on what the trends are. We understand maybe the next 2 years that we're going to need let's say plumbers, because plumbing's an area where I feel like there's always a high need and there's not enough training. We're going to need 2,000 plumbers. Great. Let's work as a collective industry, companies and government to figure out where are the sources of training? Are they doing a good enough job to meet industry standards? And then how do we back that up into our education and training programs and public schools to share information to make sure we have a good enough pipeline of folks? So it takes a lot of coordination across not just the government and workforce entities, but also education and training entities and industry. And so no one group is to fault for, the disjointed talent. There's also a really long trend of a college for all movement that happened, in the last 40 years prior to this. And so I think career preparation has also lacked for most residents up until a few years ago, where I think there was a reconnection. So I say all that to say, the efforts that are happening so far are great. I think more collaboration across all of the three critical groups: government, education, and workforce. I'm sorry, government, education, and industry will make sure that we meet the goals collectively.
Thank you very much for that. I wondered if, let's see, I think if the Ms. Kamla would like to comment on that area, because you make a point as well that long-term workforce planning is an area that you see an opportunity for the government, particularly this agency, to do a better job.
Absolutely. I agree with Ms. Bracci. I think that we should be doing this long-term training. I think there are several trades which have always seemed to have a shortage in DC's construction industry, and there just aren't enough workers in DC to fill these projects. And a lot of these positions have like high paying wages and are really good career paths. And so uh, with just multi-year projections on what projects are expected and what skills will be needed, I think there's just a big opportunity to tailor training programs to fill those skill gaps. One of the advantages of construction is that the planning process takes several years. So there's several years from when a plan is developed to when they break ground. And that gives adequate time to figure out like approximately how many jobs we're going to need. So I just think that this is one area in which multi-year planning is really appropriate.
I appreciate that, and we will do our best to examine some of those skill sets that we know we always need in the construction industry, and we'll examine it with the director of DOES as to how we're doing with that. As you said, HVAC systems are critical and necessary to any construction job that we have. So what are those skill sets you need? And should the government, I think I'm hearing, should the government play a decisive role in assuring that that pool of employees are available? And how do we do it, and when do we do it, and how do we keep that pool of individuals moving forward so that they are available? And then the idea of long-term employment as opposed to a job by job opportunity, given that we know we have on our horizon through law that we will be in construction for possibly the next 10 to 15 years. And so that gives us a sense of what we might need to focus on, and we should be focusing on it now, is what I'm hearing individuals say. But I wanted to quickly turn to ABC Metro and ask, what are you finding in your need for skill set?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
I mean, I mentioned the core program that has been very successful since 2008, expanding, 10 weeks, offering even there's core provisions which, include your basic, safety instruction, construction math, and um, communication skills and material handling. I mean, I think it just comes back to just getting the foot in the door. And then once these skilled workers are able to, go with a company, whether it's a member company or within the district, and then having those companies having a set of playing rules and streamlining the approach of just allowing them to be part of the workforce.
So yes, your testimony focused on the valuable pre-employment job training demands. And you articulated the 8 different, disciplines that you're concerned with. But I was wondering if your organization can also identify some of the core training, specific training activities, examples like plumbers, electricians,
Oh,
if
yes,
that is an
absolutely.
issue for your
I
organization
believe
as well.
HVAC, basic construction needs on plumbing and electricians is one of the top ones.
Okay. We have a zillion elevators in the District of Columbia, and I seldom, if ever, hear of the need for that service. Does anyone on the panel want to speak to that? Do you feel that that's or tell me, how do you address the need for elevators in your construction jobs? And we'll start with ABC Metro.
Madam Chair, that's a great question. I do not have in front of me our information from our member companies that are dealing with the elevator construction workforce and what their needs are within the district. But I'd be more than happy to get some more detailed data information on how we are working to try to either fill that void and make sure that industry is being helped in the needs of outside the apprenticeship programs of filling
Yeah.
those needs.
I appreciate that, and was not to put you on the spot
Yeah.
or your organization on the spot, but I just know that it just seems with all of the elevators that we have in the city and the fact that they frequently are a sore spot from constituents, that it would be interesting to see how we are adjusting to that as an industry across the board. I'll ask. Let's see, Sydney, for sure. Dear friend, how are you? Tell us what's going on in your industry. Do you have a need for elevator? Or how do you address the issue of elevators? Or do you get into that part of construction?
No, I don't get into that part with the elevators. I do know that predominantly the union has a hold on the elevators. I do know that I have relatives that do work that install elevators. My brother, my nephew, my brother-in-law have all worked for the union. I know that I have heard that they put out programs. They struggle a little bit with getting qualified apprentices because there's an aptitude test, from my understanding, that is pretty high ranked when it comes to math. And sometimes it makes it harder for them to get apprentices. I know they search for apprentices because it has a very high aptitude policy. That's all I know. That's all I
Well,
heard.
thank you. Thank you very much. And I didn't mean to dwell on that, but I was very curious because, that's an area that we at the council hear from constituents the need for repair. So I just wanted to see if there was any hankering for that particular skill set to be developed within our school system or our training system. And now I'm hearing that it's handled by the unions. And so I am intrigued because I guess we're talking about how do we get construction in particular accommodated in our community. And I know that many of our jobs are unionized, but I also know that many are not. And so I'm just very interested in whether or not there is an issue there that we're trying to put on the table when we talk about whether or not we have a unionized job that we're working on or a non-unionized job. Does that matter when we think about the skill sets that we need? Just wondered I'll ask Federal City Council.
This might be a better question for the contractors, and I think there's just a general viewpoint that we are agnostic. We support companies that are union and non-union. And so what we are hoping to get is just a general industry collaboration in terms of what is the standard for skills, what are the needs, and then what are the hopefully career opportunities. So obviously the union has very well regimented and built out standards, and so that's always looked to. But we work with companies that are union and merit.
Thank you. And I know you're saying to yourselves, where is the councilwoman going with all of these questions? I'm really trying to set the stage so that we talk about, today we're going to talk about First Source. We're going to examine it with the director. But in talking about it, that's sort of like the beginning, but also the end of the process. And I'm very curious, and I think the public is very curious as to what are the particulars that go into being engaged in a construction job in the District of Columbia. What are the nuances? What is the politics of it? I mean, let's just be honest. And so I'm trying to establish a line of comfort so that we can really talk about this subject matter so that we get some clarity, and where we can make necessary changes, we do so. So comfort level, that's what I'm after. Trying to get us to, it's one thing to say that there's a problem. It's another, how do we fix it? And how do we fix it so that as much as possible, we have some consensus? Because we know from just the data that has been presented that the system isn't working the way it was intended to work. And times have changed and more projects are available in our area. So I thank you for that. Ms. Adley, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of what you were concerned with. You talked about the alternative plans reinforcing the old boy networks. Can you give us a couple of examples? I think you started when you talked about the division of labor, the supplier versus the actual skill set to do the work, and how the contractor will move to a second tier contractor. So then they shift the reporting requirements. So
Yeah, I can speak to that because it happens a lot. I've spent my time in DC, and I've spent a lot of money to actually try to set up to meet the compliance of First Source, which includes, my apprenticeship program, and, working with DC workers the best I can, because the workforce is limited in DC. To who really wants to work and who wants to put their mind into it. But we've managed to be able to do that. And what has happened over time, I've seen contractors come into the city, and that $300,000 threshold, I believe it's 300,000 if I'm not mistaken.
yes.
They are signing papers saying, and it's legal. They sign a piece of paper that say they're doing the supervision and they're supplying materials. And they put that all under that 300,000 that kind of goes under the radar of the First Source. And then they do what they normally do is sub it out, 300,000 to this one, 300,000 to just the labor force. They're not truly working for that company but they're subbing it out. And then what that does is it creates what I call, which truly happens, is wage theft and under the table payments. And I brought this up a long time ago, but I think it was 2 years ago on another roundtable, and I pointed that out, but nobody has done anything about it. They were going to call me, we were going to talk about it further, but I'm trying to run a business, so I don't have time to keep calling and asking people what are we going to do about it. I've just lived with it, but it severely has hurt my ability to get work when they do that, and they're using out-of-town contractors as well. So
Thank you very much.
I don't have an answer for it, other than people are looking for work. All kinds of people are, out-of-town contractors and so forth coming in, and they're doing that. And I think sometimes I myself would like the recognition that we're doing the right thing and really be partners, rather than when I'm putting in payroll and I'm doing things and and if I get flagged on things and I'm thinking, oh my God, do you realize this is not anything compared to what's really going on? When sometimes I can't meet the apprentices completely, and that means 3-to-1 ratio. That doesn't mean that I don't have the 60% of DC apprentices. I do, but that 3-to-1 ratio on a job where I have more journeyman, I have usually put more journeymen on a job than I do apprentices, but yet I'm supposed to put a 3-to-1 ratio. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself right, but I get caught in that trap. I don't have enough apprentices. Then I get a letter from DOE's. Does that make sense?
I'm trying. I'm struggling to understand those numbers. You're saying that 3-to-1 ratio, you're to have 3 apprentice for every journeyman?
No, the other way around.
Sit.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
3 journeymen to 1 apprentice. And that's where I usually get that letter, because I meet the journeyman quota with DC. But when I'm spread out amongst jobs, I can only get so many apprentices in my program, and I can't quite meet that 3-to-1.
So that is the situation that you're experiencing. What can change that experience? In other words, what can be done to change that?
Well, I think a small business, we can only put so many apprentices into our workforce, because the journeymen's and we use the NCCER program for the painting force that we use. The journeyman has to train the apprentices. So I have to keep my journeyman going, and my DC residents have been with me a fairly long time. So that being said, I don't have an answer other than somebody to really understand a smaller company can only handle so many apprentices, if that makes sense. I think at times I've been up to 15 apprentices, but if I start going over that, then I'm tripping over myself, so to speak. I'm not able to train as thoroughly as I'd like to train.
So are you saying when you had 15 apprentices, you had as many as 45 journeymen?
Yeah, there's been times I've been up to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also, I fluctuate on the jobs that I get, so I go up and down in my labor force. Like right now, we're probably about 60, but at one time when I was, I think it was last summer, we were doing quite a few multifamily units. We were up to close to 100.
100 apprentice or journeyman?
Painters in general.
Okay.
I don't have the particular ratio in front of me.
Okay, gotcha.
And then what happens also with the competition coming in, the workforce fluctuates. So it makes it harder administratively speaking, and our bandwidth is only so big to try to keep up with all this as well, if that makes sense. Because payroll, you know, what do you got when you do payroll? I'm not only paying my people through my Sage program, I got to enter into LCP tracker. And then there's another one. I don't know. I don't do payroll in, you know, personally. I have a person that does it, but there's two that really catch us up sometimes. So we're entering it in twice, which I don't mind. I don't mind. I think it helps keep people in line. But at the same time, this $300,000 threshold is letting people get out of this system and keeping them out of DOEs. So they go in the shadows and they're not being really watched at all, if that's making sense.
Well, what do you mean when you say they're in the shadows?
If they're under 300,000, they don't have to register with DOEs.
Okay. However, yeah, I got you. So they put supplies
They put supplies and call
in the
themselves,
shadows.
yeah, they put the supplies. They put the supplies in the shadows and they call themselves the supervisor. If you're a supervisor, you go under the radar.
Mhm.
And so then when you sub it out, you can sub it out to $300,000 and less.
Okay.
I know it's kind of complicated. I'd have to sit down and show you the paperwork, but it is done and it is legal.
Yeah,
I've been told it is legal.
we'll do breakfast over that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
No, this is important. I'm asking these questions because I think it's time for us to get down to the bottom line of what's really going on. It's one thing to make policy and to have skin in the game. It's another to make policy because it's good government. And I think we want the policies to relate to realities and how do we improve it so that the residents benefit and that the government is acting responsibly. Let's see.
Well, you know, I know you say you're acting about the government acting responsibly, but the contractors have to be responsible too.
Well, now,
And that's a hard one because construction, I don't know. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be in the Navy and not in construction.
I hear you. Well, all of us have to do our part, and I agree. But to fix this, since this is a government process, I feel like we have to be focused on how can we fix it so that it works for the industry. Maybe that's the best way to say this. Works for the industry and hopefully, as they say, do no harm or as little harm as
Yeah,
is accrued.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I just want to give the DC government a lot of kudos because, like I said in the beginning, when I started working in DC, you've definitely helped my business grow and I've been acknowledged. So it is working. It's a matter of trying to get everybody at the same expectations, I believe.
Well, let me ask you, are you advocating for, or perhaps this happens already, where those who are likely to work on a job once a contractor is selected, you all come together and come together with a government representative? Or is it all just reporting from the contractor to the government?
Well, I've never been asked to meet a representative on the job from the government. Usually it's always done by, they like to look at payroll.
I see.
And I know that there's
So
been a-
government doesn't come to work locations and see if you've got 45 journeymen and 12,
they do,
um,
they do at times, they do at times, but it's not consistent enough.
okay.
And you know, especially on weekends and overtime, there's never a government employee checking it out.
I appreciate that. I actually was passing a work site once I'm familiar with, and some of the workers, it was on a Saturday, they wanted to tell me about wage theft.
Oh, yeah.
So I hear you. So I know it happens. I move on to, I'm boring them to death, I know. Yeah, all right. Well, I want to thank our public witnesses. If there's anything anyone cares to add from our public witnesses right now, I'd love to get your comments, and then we will move to our government witness.
Madam Chair, I just
Yes, thank you.
want to thank the opportunity, and I will follow back along with our leadership at ABC Metro Washington on some of the questions you asked, especially on the elevator side. I know outside the district on the elevator front industry, a lot of non-union merit-based shop companies, you know, they tap into the community colleges very early on the apprenticeship programs to build up, you know, those businesses. So maybe that's something to look at outside of the district to bring in more workers for elevator. But I will go back and, you know, bring some of these questions to our leadership and maybe give you a little bit more in-depth, you know, insight into what we think would be some solutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to the panel. Thank you very much for your comments today. And now we will hear from our government witness, the Director of the Department of Employment Services, Director Morris Hughes. And I will swear you in and any of your team members that are joining you. All right, Mr. King, welcome as well. All right. Yes. Looks like that the rope and stanchion are kind of tight there, aren't they? Yeah. Strange. All right, okay. Now, if you will raise your right hand and we'll swear you in. Want to make sure that you're swearing that and affirming that your testimony and any statements you make before us today are truthful and complete. Thank you very much. And your testimony we'll receive now. Thank you.
Well, I think it's afternoon now, but good afternoon, Chairperson Bonds, council members, and staff of the committee. My name is Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, and I am the Director of the DC Department of Employment Services. I'm pleased to present an overview of the performance, impact, and continued evolution of the district's First Source program, one of the district's most important tools for aligning economic development with workforce transformation. The district's First Source program is managed by the Office of First Source Compliance, housed within our Office of Wage and Hour. First Source is a district law that requires government-assisted projects and contracts to prioritize hiring DC residents. Specifically, employers receiving district assistance for projects valued at $300,000 or more must ensure that at least 51% of all new hires are district residents. This requirement applies to both construction and non-construction contracts and includes alternative plans that allow residents to participate in pre-apprenticeship training programs, building pathways to long-term careers. First Source is more than a compliance requirement. It is a strategic lever for economic progress and workforce development. By connecting residents to jobs created through public investment, we reduce unemployment among district residents, strengthen local communities by ensuring economic benefit remain in the district, promote career pathways through training and apprenticeships, and support inclusive growth, particularly in Ward 7 and 8, which consistently account for the highest share of First Source DC hires. In 2024, there were 951 First Source DC hires, with 505 or 53.1% coming from Ward 7 and 8. From January to June of 2025, 56% of First Source hires came from Wards 7 and 8. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, construction, infrastructure, and skilled trades in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area is experiencing a low unemployment paired with increased job vacancies, conditions that place upward pressure on wages while making talent pipelines more difficult to sustain. Against this backdrop, in FY25 and the first quarter of FY26, the First Source program has delivered measurable results such as executing 1,295 agreements, including 625 in construction and 670 non-construction agreements. Further, from January to June of 2025, the First Source program created 1,049 jobs, with 165 in construction and 884 in non-construction. First Source compliance efforts resulted in 552 of those jobs being filled by DC residents, or 52.6% of new hires. When considering First Source construction projects over $5 million, the goal for compliance are based on the percentage numbers of hours worked by district residents in 4 categories. Journey workers are the highest skilled, highest paid workers on the construction site, and First Source law requires at least 20% of these hours are worked by district residents and is typically found to be compliant. Apprentices are workers in approved apprenticeship programs, learning on the job from journey workers while participating in classroom training. The First Source law requires at least 60% of these hours are worked by district residents. Special interest is placed on apprenticeships because this group of workers represent the future journey workers in a highly skilled trade that will be able to maintain sustainable wages long-term. It's also worth noting that district apprentices continue to work a percentage of hours that exceed the requirement. Skilled laborers are experienced construction workers with some training and advanced knowledge that perform specialized work, often requiring the use of construction tools, who typically earn higher wages due to their expertise and work complexity. First Source law requires at least 51% of their hours are worked by district residents. Due to a shortage of ready-to-work residents in this industry, contractors find meeting this particular goal challenging. Common laborers are the lowest paid entry workers that are performing unskilled manual labor or manual work on the construction site. The First Source law requires at least 70% of their hours are worked by district residents. Due to a shortage of ready-to-work residents in this industry, contractors find meeting this goal challenging. During FY25, district residents earned over $26 million and worked over 800,000 hours through the First Source projects. During the first quarter of FY26, district residents have earned over $4.7 million, working over 149,000 hours. During both periods, more than half of the wages earned by district residents were by the highest skilled journey workers. Now, key priorities in FY25 and beyond. DOES is taking creative approaches like leveraging our innovative workforce programs to meet DC labor needs while ensuring all Washingtonians have a fair shot at good paying jobs. For example, in September of 2025, the Office of First Source Compliance, working with the Office of Talent and Client Services, our Division of State Initiatives, the DC Infrastructure Academy, the American Job Centers, Out of School Youth, and our Office of Apprenticeship Information and Training, convened a Common Labor Initiative session to provide an overview of DOES job readiness programs for employers. The Common Labor Initiative matches employers with job-ready candidates that have been through DOES job-ready trainings. This strategy encourages district residents to leverage DOES resources to prepare for entry to the workforce as common laborers with a pathway to higher wage earning construction trades. Additionally, we continue to connect with the First Source employer community by connecting First Source conferences and outreach events. Last June, the Office of First Source Compliance participated in the Capital One Arena Project Trade Contractor Outreach event, where we addressed over 200 based business and certified business enterprises regarding the First Source Law agreement requirements. Over the FY26, the Office of First Source Compliance participated as an exhibitor or presenter in bringing awareness to the First Source Law and agreement requirements at 7 conferences and business resource fairs or planned contracting agency training sessions. At these events, the Office of First Source Compliance shares First Source literature and answers First Source related questions. In October of 2025, the Office of First Source Compliance held its 6th annual First Source Conference at the Kellogg Conference Hotel, located at Gallaudet University. The conference provided information on district's First Source Law and agreement requirements and apprenticeship requirements for non-construction contracts and construction projects to 181 attendees. The conference provided DOES resources, strategies, and partnerships to help businesses strengthen First Source compliance, including sessions with the Office of Talent and Client Services, the Division of State Initiatives, the DC Infrastructure Academy, our American Job Centers, Out of School Youth, and our Apprenticeship Office. We also heard from our contracting agencies how they incorporate First Source in their process, and best practices were shared by non-construction employers and construction contractors. Trainings regarding online systems and the Common Labor Initiative were also shared. We understand that the construction industry is very competitive and that there's often a large demand for skills that only a limited number of individuals possess, which can sometimes make meeting First Source requirements a challenge. To address this, the Office of First Source Compliance has developed a robust program around alternative plans. When employers have demonstrated difficulty meeting First Source requirements based on a lack of district residents in a particular trade, the Office of First Source Compliance will allow a partial waiver of the traditional new hires or hours worked percentage requirements and enact a special hiring agreement alternative plan. Through the alternative plan, employers enter into a special hiring agreement to provide workforce development training or placement arrangements, which DOES to help build or local talent pipeline. There was 1 new alternative plan entered into during FY25, and there are currently 7 active alternative plans being monitored for compliance. DOES continues to implement innovative performance-driven strategies, including the Common Labor Initiative, employer outreach, and alternative compliance plans to address labor shortages while maintaining accountability. To this end, apprenticeship remains central to First Source innovation and adapt to the times. For example, discussions at the 2026 Consumer Electronics Show highlighted how technology, AI, and automation are reshaping workforce needs. In an effort to meet these evolving needs, DOES is going to pilot an enterprise-wide First Source agreement and expand opportunities in non-construction and technology. Now, I'd like to give a brief update on RFK Stadium campus redevelopment and First Source. First Source will play a critical role in ensuring that RFK Memorial Stadium campus redevelopment project benefits DC residents. Specifically, the recently passed RFK Act requires compliance with the First Source Employment Agreement Act of 1984 with a preference of at least 20% of new jobs created in connection with the project being designated for residents in Ward 7 and 8. DOES will ensure compliance of the first source agreement that 51% of new hires are district residents by working with the developer to engage contractors and subcontractors in RFK campus-related work, and guarantee that local talent is prioritized for construction and related jobs. In addition, DOES will work to ensure that 35% of apprenticeable hours are worked by district residents. This approach not only supports economic development, but also fosters community trust and engagement in transformative projects. We look forward to working with the mayor, our partners throughout government, the private sector, and the community to build a workforce ready to fill the jobs necessary to complete this key project. First Source is a powerful tool for advancing the district's workforce and economic development goals. By holding employers accountable and connecting residents to opportunity, we ensure that public investments translate into tangible benefits for our communities. DOES remains committed to strengthening this program, addressing operational barriers, and delivering on its promise of equity and inclusion. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I think would like to start with a couple of the points that you make in your testimony today. On page 3, where you speak to your journey workers, and the first source law requires 20% of these hours are worked by district residents. And you find that to be compliant. But in looking at the impact of first source, you also talk about the apprenticeships, which are at least 60% of their hours be reduced. And I'm wondering if we are interested in increasing the pool of workers who can perform on these jobs, would it make sense for the percent for journey workers be increased from 20% upward, and for apprenticeships to be decreased downward to 40%? And my thinking is that you've heard that the industry is complaining that they don't have the bodies with the skill set to fill the jobs. They don't have the bodies of interest that will even do the entry-level jobs. So I'm wondering if we maybe make it less of a requirement in order to get people in, and increase the requirement that if you're working on a job, not just 20%, but maybe 40%, we would then hold on to our workforce, as opposed to individuals working one job and then waiting 6 months and having an opportunity to work again.
So I'm going to take a stab at it, and then Dan.
All right,
I'll have
okay, you and Mr. King. Sure.
I'll have him follow after me. We have a talent pipeline problem, but we have a talent pool problem. And in order to get people through the pipeline, you got to have a pool that precedes it. And the reason why I would hedge a bit on changing the number, decreasing the number of apprenticeship hours, is because that's how you build your pipeline, right? And so we have to build and get more DC residents skilled to get the higher paying, the higher skilled positions. And so in order for us to do that, we need as many people working in apprenticeships. And I think folks often forget that apprenticeships are actual jobs, and they're learning on the job. And so if we have more people in apprenticeship that are learning, that are working, they'll have an opportunity to move up. And so decreasing the hours doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily help us build up to the other the other labor categories that we monitored.
Thank you for the opportunity, Councilman Bonds and Director. For the journey worker category, we have to remember that there's always going to be a limited number of highly specialized workers at the top. That's why they get paid the most. And the talent pool currently is limited in DC for that. So why the benefit of having an increased number of apprenticeship is that we're building towards a pipeline for the future so that we can maintain the labor and maintain opportunities for DC residents to earn those high wages. During apprenticeship, when they start out, they're only making a fraction of the journey wage. And then as they learn on the job, their wages grow and grow, and eventually they can have a sustainable, livable wage.
Thank you for that response. I thought I better ask that question since we've had some discussion about the need for keeping people in these jobs. So thank you for that. On page 4 of your testimony, you say that FY25 residents earned over 26 million and worked over 800,000 hours on first source projects. Do we have documentation that proves that this was the payout, this 26 million?
Yeah, so we look at certified wage records. That's how we
Okay.
make the determination.
And you do have certified wage records that speak to that? Okay.
Yes.
You've heard that there is some feeling within the industries, construction industries, that there is wage theft. Do you have any indication of what that might be, or has any of those complaints come directly to your office?
I'll take a stab at answering that. So when it comes to wage theft, we have a number of opportunities to investigate and to partner even with our colleagues over at the Office of the Attorney General. They have been very good at also putting out press releases about their wage theft investigations and their findings. I would say that that is an area where the district and the DMV as a whole, because we also do correlation or collaboration with Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia to make sure that those same contractors aren't doing the same things in other states that they may try to come here to the district.
So we do follow up on the complaints.
Not only do we follow up, but we partner with OAG, and OAG often goes after, especially some of the larger contractors, to claim wage or reclaim wages and damages.
All right, I know that's another division of labor within the Department of Employment Services, but do we have a sense of what is the volume of theft that, based on the claims that have been filed, let's say in FY25?
So I think we should answer what are the number, a rough estimate of complaints that have come in regarding wage theft in construction. And I don't know if you have it off the top of your head. If you don't, we can follow up, but do you have a sense?
Yeah, I should explain too that when it comes to wage theft in construction, we get very few complaints. It seemed to be a industry in which there's a lot of fear of retaliation, especially with increased ICE enforcement happening. So what typically happens is we get anonymous complaints or information to come in through our hotline, owh.ask@dc.gov. And that's why it gets referred to the Office of Attorney General, where they have a civil rights division that does investigations outside of complaints.
All right, you mentioned an area which I guess we all should be very much aware of, and that is the operations of ICE, as is commonly referred to, and how it affects the various workforces that we have throughout the city. What are we doing as a government? What is your shop doing and as a whole to make people comfortable that they can get to their jobs?
So that's a very big
Yes.
question. Let me try to unpack the Department of Employment Services role here, which quite frankly, it's very limited. The beneficiaries of government contracts have a responsibility to ensure that people who are working on these projects and on these sites are there legally and appropriately. And so our job is not to investigate that. But we can provide information, we can make referrals to other parts of government, should we need to. Our role is really enforcement of, first source compliance law being implemented correctly on projects. But my team does not have a role of going out on site and doing investigations. It is not within our purview.
I appreciate that, and I happen to know that is true. What I'm really asking, though, is overall, when we think about the workforce, because workforce is your bailiwick.
It is.
That's what this department is concerned with. I'm just wondering, where are we today in what can and perhaps has even occurred and will occur or can occur on work sites? I mean, how are we behaving? Are we, for instance, do we have more monitoring of the work sites, in-person monitoring to determine that the sites are really up and running? Because that would affect payroll.
So we do have compliance specialists that go out to the field and monitor or visit work sites. Again, I want to make sure I frame this appropriately. Their job is not to determine, whether or not someone can legally work in the United States. But we do have folks that are on site. We also know that there has been increased ICE presence in the District of Columbia. We've heard anecdotally there's not a requirement to report to us as the Department of the District's Department of Labor that ICE is out on construction sites, but we have heard anecdotally that ICE is showing up places within the district and certain construction sites. But our scope is so narrow and limited, there wouldn't necessarily be even a venue for people to report that. But we're aware of an increased presence. We know that it is happening. We have folks that are in the field because that's the nature of their job, is to go into the field and, as a compliance specialist, look at their projects. It's just our role is very limited and legal status.
Yes, and I understand that. I guess my question is really in the realm of, if First Source is a stopgap against misrepresentation of the workforce on a project, how are we assured that if I have 20 apprentices and because of the circumstances, only 2 are showing up, but how are we assured that the salaries for all of them are not being misreported when they are not showing up? That I just want to know if we have thought about how we handle those situations.
Yes.
Since we have a very active Department of Justice.
Yes.
Okay.
So, there are a number of ways to be proactive in our enforcement. One is we look at certified payroll. We look at the compliance specialists have the ability to go out into the field, look at certified payroll and other responsive documents. I do not expect or require that my compliance specialists go and check, residency and ID of people on site. I do not want them to do that for very obvious reasons. But one of the tools that we have are looking at payroll. That's probably our strongest tool and lever that we can pull to make sure that people are getting paid and paid appropriately. We do have an anonymous tip line, so people can call and make it an anonymous tip. And we do have people who make tips. Construction isn't actually our highest industry where we have wage theft complaints. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been hospitality, childcare, elder care. Does that sound?
Yeah, when it comes to complaints, we don't get a lot of complaints, but it's known to have a lot of issues of non-compliance. So the way we have to find it is through random investigations and relying upon anonymous complaints. But we're not alone in that. Every contracting agency has a department that does Davis-Bacon compliance. Also, we have the U.S. Department of Labor that does Davis-Bacon compliance and investigations. So we stick within our jurisdiction authority when it comes to first source or for wage and hour, and we're good partners with those other entities when it comes to their compliance.
Thank you both for that answer. I wanted all of that on the record so
Yes,
that
ma'am.
there be no misunderstanding as to how we are moving forward as the local government. So thank you for that. You mentioned that on page 5, you did the first source employer community. Last June, you did the Capital One Arena, the certified businesses, the 200, and then you did the OFSC participated in the exhibit. Are these attended by the contractors only? Is that what you're sharing? Or are the employees on jobs expected to also be in any of these?
Yeah, for most of those, it's not going to be workers. It's going to be the contractors. It could also be representatives from the contracting agencies that are putting out those work, or potential contractors or subcontractors that want to bid on the projects. So they have a good understanding of what they're walking into, the type of first source requirements that they're going to have to meet, the type of systems that we're going to be asking them to report into.
Okay, thank you. And then in October, when you did the 6th annual First Source Conference, you mentioned that you had for non-construction contracts and construction projects, you had 181 attendees. Who were these attendees?
Yep. And again, that's much of the same
Same group?
group.
Okay. And then on page 6, you said there was only one new alternative plan entered into during FY25, and that there are currently 6 active plans being monitored for compliance. So I guess I'm asking myself, why so few alternative plans when you heard every presenter today said alternative plans are a problem? Help me understand that.
I want to talk about this a little bit because I'm confused by the testimony. I hear from the public witnesses, I hear a concern about alternative plans, but I also hear a concern about not having skilled labor available. And so no one has really addressed what I think are some of the core questions. Like, one, how do we get people interested in careers in the skilled trades? I'm not talking about, elementary, middle school, high school. Certainly we could continue to do that work, and that's longer term work. But in the present, how do we get DC residents interested and working? How do we build the pipeline? We know, and everyone who's testified has said in some sort of way, that there's not enough DC residents to work in these positions. They also say that the alternative plans are an issue because of the lack of transparency, and there not being a clear, let's just say transparency. There's not a clear guide or process. But if we don't have alternative plans, we can't build the pipeline. and we've got to build the pipeline. And the alternative plans are negotiated and developed per project because the skills and the labor that's needed per project is unique to that project. And so what we need for Capital One Arena isn't necessarily what we need for RFK. What we need for RFK isn't what we need for an elementary school modernization project. And so we've got to tailor these plans based on the labor needs. And I'm not sure you can have all of these things at the same time. I'm not sure you can, ask to standardize the alternative plan process, but then still have the flexibility to innovate and develop an alternative plan that's unique to a project. I don't think you can do both at the same time. I think it's one of the best tools that we have. I think Cedar Hill is a great example of what an alternative plan could bring. And I think we have other good examples of what alternative plans can bring. I don't think they're that bad. And I think they're important tools that we need for economic development.
All right, and I'm assuming in an alternative plan, the number of journeymen, the hours worked, the number of apprenticeships may vary.
Yes, and
Okay.
Dan, perhaps you can give some examples of what alternative plans, look like. Like, what are some of the different varying requirements in these alternative plans?
Yeah, thank you for that. Also, there's been a great effort just in the last 24 months, 36 months, to bring more clarity to the alternative plan process. So as we got into having qualifications to have an alternative plan, now we're putting the onus on the developer and the contractor to make sure that, hey, you put forth an effort to see how to first meet the first source requirements, and having some type of an employment plan that shows that you can meet those requirements or where your shortages are for specific trades. So then we'll look to have an alternative plan that will build a pipeline for the future for the trades where you've identified you have shortages. Also, we are going to look for opportunities to increase the number of apprentices that may work on certain parts of the project where you have a shortage or we know shortages are showing up on other projects. We also look for opportunities to create some type of workforce development. As ABC Core mentioned, they have been a part of several alternative plans in the past because they offer pre-apprenticeship training that helps create job-ready workers for the future. Also, DOES has job readiness programs. We have our DC Infrastructure Academy. We also have a pilot program that the director started a few years ago for elevator training. So we are able to loop people into those type of workforce development for future hires on projects. One of the big things that we do with these alternative plans is not just have an enrollment in pre-apprenticeship, but we're also going to create some level of requirement to have a certain number of those enrollees to complete their training. We're also going to be looking for those general contractors to find jobs with either their GC firm or with one of the subs on the project to provide opportunities for work, either in the common labor or skilled labor or possibly with a new apprenticeship. So it's a great opportunity, very innovative, to fill the needs for those general contractors that are currently on the project and for the future workforce.
I appreciate hearing that. Would you make sure that within 10 days, I'd like to get copies of the one new alternative plan and the 6 that have been in existence and that you're monitoring? Also, I'd like to get an alternative plan that you have constructed with, let's say, a restaurant. As just wondering if that is, because that's a non-construction industry, trying to think of some of the industries that have.
Oh, like technology.
That have come.
Technology would probably.
Technology is fine too, yes.
I think we should.
In other words, I'd like to see some of these plans, please, within 10 days, if that's possible.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to turn to my colleague who has been more than faithful waiting, Councilmember Felder, who is our representative from the great community, my homeland, Ward 7. There you go, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson Barnes. Good afternoon, Director, members of your senior leadership team. It's always good to see you. As you are aware, Ward 7 has one of the highest unemployment rates in the District of Columbia. And working to address that is one of my top priorities as the Ward 7 council member. One of the initiatives in which I plan to roll out within the coming months is called Ward 7 Builds, which focuses on creating more opportunities for small and local businesses in Ward 7 and the surrounding communities, but most importantly, put individuals to work. The First Source program is a valuable tool when monitored effectively. And if we're going to continue to drive down unemployment, then we need to ensure that the program is running smoothly and working in a way that it is intended to. And if we want to truly be able to help our unemployed and underemployed residents. Now, Director, as you are aware, the First Source program was established over 30 years ago as a strategy to reduce unemployment by ensuring that DC residents receive priority consideration for new job created by local government assistant projects or contracts in both construction and non-construction industries. Now, while over the years, various amendments were made to strengthen the program, unfortunately, there's a number of challenges that persist, particularly regarding participation, fulfilling requirements, increasing job opportunities for DC residents, and programmatic outcomes. Now, I'm hopeful that today's conversation will help the council get a better sense of what those challenges are and what contributes to them as we discuss the operational barriers, the implementation experience, et cetera. Now, whether it is attracting new hires, compliance for employees, or overtime payments, I'm confident that we can work to identify those challenges. So once again, I'm glad that you are here. And with that, I will jump right into my questions. Now, Director, I know you've had the pleasure of serving as a director, what, 6 years?
I think a little bit more than 6 years.
Okay.
I think maybe closer to 8, but 10 years in the agency.
Well, you aging gracefully. And
Thank God we don't look like what we've been through.
appreciate you. Director, could you share how many developers and contractors in Ward 7 are currently actively involved in the First Source agreement, top of mind?
Dan, I'm going to ask you to take that question. Do you have it disaggregated by ward?
Not the contractors. We could probably pull the projects,
Okay.
but we wouldn't have specific contractors based out of those wards.
So
Wow.
if we pull the contracts, that'll give you a sense of who, or the projects, it'll give you a sense of what contractors are on the projects.
Okay.
And then we'd probably have to do some additional data analysis to determine if they're Ward 7
Okay.
companies. Is that what you want to know?
Yes.
Okay. So we'd have to do some data analysis and data mining to do that. But we'll make sure that the team gets it as a follow-up, and within 10 days, we'll provide it.
Okay. Now, it has been my experience from talking to residents or individuals competing after contracts that, hey, I go on these sites and I don't see residents that look like the communities in which they're working in. Director, could you speak to if there are any common compliance challenges broadly and/or in Ward 7, specifically for Ward 7 projects?
I've shared this before. I'm so glad that you've asked me this, because I've talked about this before. When we talk about the evolution of First Source, it's more than just making sure DC residents have jobs. It was a lever for equity. It was to ensure that people from Black and brown communities had access to jobs. So that's important. We have to keep that at the front. I've been asked over the years, and people say to me over the years, I go to these construction sites and I see people that don't look like they're DC residents. Well, what a DC resident looks like today has evolved. And I want us to be careful and not falling into a trap. The same reasons that kept DC residents out of jobs, that first source law had to be created to make sure that DC residents and Black and brown folks got jobs, is sometimes now the same sort of rhetoric and thought process that folks have when they go to these construction sites and say, nobody looks like a DC resident or looks like me, because what a DC resident looks like has evolved. And so I just wanted to make sure I make that note. With that being said, I don't have my staff go up to sites and say, let me look at the folks that are on site. They look like they're DC or Ward 7 or Ward 8, and let me see if they are, because we don't want anyone to, think that we are profiling them. So we don't do that, but we do verify residency when we're looking at certified payroll, and we have the address, and we can determine whether or not they're Ward 7 or Ward 8 or even a DC resident.
How are you monitoring the compliance for new hires?
So Dan, I'll let you talk a little bit about can you go a little bit further than
Sure.
the certified payroll?
Yep. So I really want to specify that the first source law in itself has parts in it that gives hiring preferences for Ward 7 and Ward 8. And it's something that our team focuses on, especially when we've identified that a contractor is falling short of a goal early in the project. A way to catch up is to provide them with residents from Ward 7 and Ward 8 that will qualify as hard to employ, could be double counted when it comes to those hours work percentage projects. The hours that Ward 7 and Ward 8 workers are doing could be double counted to help them with compliance. The upcoming RFK development has a preference of 20% of all of the new hire positions should go to Ward 7 and Ward 8. So our team is going to be helping to identify those Ward 7 and Ward 8 individuals that are looking for work in construction. We're going to make sure that they're registered in DC networks. We're also going to collaborate with those contractors to see if we can do any type of hiring fair or event to bring them together so that they can ultimately put them on the project. So it is a conscious effort in every single one of the first source projects that we monitor to let them know, hey, there is a way to help with your compliance by looking for these hard to employ workers in Ward 7 and Ward 8.
Can you talk a little bit about what the process is to monitor compliance, like what you and the team do to monitor compliance?
And it's a little bit different depending on the type of first source requirement. So if it's a smaller project, under $5 million, then it's 51% of new hires. The documentation and the monitoring reports that we receive go into our system called FORS. And that lets us know how many residents or DC residents have been hired in new positions. You also have to understand that a lot of the contractors that have won the bids to work on these projects are coming with the already workforce. So the individuals that are already a part of the company or being transferred from other work sites where they may have work are not considered for compliance of 51% of new hires, only when they need to bring on additional workers. For the larger projects that are over $5 million or even qualify as a PLA, they're doing hours work percentage. Those actually have requirements to submit weekly certified payrolls. And we have a system for receiving those certified payrolls, often used by the general contracting agencies as well, so that they can see the wage portion of it. But we're looking to see the classification of the workers and the residency status of the workers in those certified payrolls.
I appreciate that, Dan. Just a follow up. So,
Yes.
what happens if you guys don't do site visits, but what happens in the event that someone falls out of compliance or you see some fraudulent behavior happening along the project?
Give us an example. What you mean?
Right. So, like, say if you said you look at their payroll to determine, depending on the project, if after 51%, that they're new residents. What happens if, they continue to recycle individuals who may not work on the site, but they have their name, a DC government address? Like, what happens in an incident like that? I do recognize that some individuals, to your point, Dan, they bring their own workforce, but what happens if that happens?
Well, I do want to be clear that we do have investigators that will go on site.
Okay,
So we make site visits regularly
okay,
throughout the duration of the project.
got you.
We do make sure that the GCs and the developers are doing employment verification as well.
Okay.
And they have to maintain that information, submit to us upon request. And then we are doing follow-up to see if residents who may have started a project as DC residents at the beginning of the project are still there when we do our closeout. So
Okay.
at the end of the project, we review all of our data. And of course, we're doing monitoring reports throughout, either on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the project and the requirements in the law. But at the closeout, once that project has received their certificate of occupancy or whatever is designated as the closeout date,
Yeah.
then we're going back through to make sure that what we had as a DC resident in the front end is still a DC resident today.
Gotcha. Could you speak to what will happen or what has happened in the event someone has violated the first source agreement?
Well, it could change the percentages.
Okay.
So if you were at a certain percentage early in the project, we're going to try to catch that as we're doing our ongoing monitoring reports so that we can strategize with the contracts to bring on new DC residents to bring the percentage back up to compliance. We've been very good at that. I think probably 6 years in a row now, we've met 51% overall in the district for new hire 51% requirements. But if they fall short at the closeout date, and as we do our closeout percentages, the law actually allows us to issue penalties. And there's a certain calculation that the law requires for that. But it shouldn't be a surprise, first of all, because we're doing ongoing monitoring throughout. And then we're just getting our numbers straight at the end of the project to let them know of the shortage is what the law requires. So once we've identified what that shortage is, it's like 1/8 of 1% of the indirect and direct labor costs will be assessed as a penalty.
Gotcha. I mentioned this in my opening testimony in my opening remarks as it relates to unemployment in Ward 7. As you probably are aware, Director, unemployment rates in Ward 7 range between 8 and 11%, which is significantly higher when you look at the city average, which is about 5%. Additionally, one of the main concerns that I hear from residents is that their needs are not being met when it comes to workforce services offered by the city. My question is, what is the engagement process for residents looking to get hired? Do they, we're going to talk about RFK in a second, but like with a massive project, do they go to DOES? Are you guys putting flyers out? Like, how are you marketing the potential workforce development opportunities as well as just workforce development opportunities in its totality?
So a few ways. One, the American Job Center is the heartbeat of the agency. All services that someone is interested in related to workforce development and our benefits programs like unemployment insurance, paid family leave, you can access through the American Job Center. We have computers there. You can build a resume. You'll register in DC networks. Registering in DC networks is critical. If you want to learn about first source jobs, there's a requirement to put first source jobs into DC networks. And so those that are registered in DC networks get contacted when there are jobs available. They also get contacted when we have job fairs. I'm willing to bet we probably are involved in sponsor table at probably more than 70 job fairs a year, both at DOES and all around DC. But coming through the American Job Center is the best way for residents to be engaged on upcoming opportunities.
And when you're promoting job opportunities, do you have two separate categories? Like, for example, a job opportunity may be available that is not related to a first source program compared to a job opportunity that may be under the first source program requirements?
Yes, in DC networks. So
Gotcha.
the feds require us through DC networks to have a job bank. And anybody who is unemployed and seeking work can look at jobs in the job bank and apply for jobs in a job. So that could be first source and non-first source. It basically scrubs all of the like vacant jobs that are online, and you can review them through DC networks. I know this sounds very technical, but the
No.
bottom line is yes, first source, non-first source jobs. There are lots of jobs in DC networks.
I'll say this. Maybe 8 years ago, I had the pleasure of working in the city administrator's office, as you know, director, and we were doing site visits to various DC government agencies as undercover bosses. So I was dressed as an everyday resident, and I walked into the American Job Center on Minnesota Avenue, and I will say your staff were very pleasant, and
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Center. I'll ask one more question because I want to be mindful of Madam Chairperson Barnes. RFK.
Yeah.
So as you are aware, the RFK development will create 14,000 construction jobs. When will first source programs begin to engage with residents about the project, and once the project start, are you intended to roll out a timeline for each of the phases of engagement, specifically so Ward 7 residents can stay abreast of the opportunities that's coming down the pipeline?
So the mayor has appointed Brian Hanlon,
Yeah.
who highly effective, amazing colleague of mine to really spearhead this project.
Okay.
And so he is getting us all together internal to the government so we can have a coordinated, clear, efficient approach, not just about workforce development, but about all of the things that it's going to take to make RFK possible. Specific to workforce development, it is my interest, and we've done this on other large construction projects where we leverage what I call an intermediary. We have like a one-stop shop. I don't want DC residents trying to search all over for workforce training opportunities that are directly connected to the vacant jobs that are being created for RFK. I want everyone to go one place. So that is my intent and my desire, and I'll work under the leadership of Brian Hanlon, who works under the leadership of Lindsay Parker to make that happen.
Thank you, Director. That concludes my questions. Madam Chair?
Councilmember Felder and Councilmember, just before you leave, I wanted to just make one comment. I've been burning to say this, that you had brought up elevator mechanics, and you know I feel very strongly about elevator mechanics. And I think someone had testified that there was an aptitude exam. And I have to tell you, I believe so much in DC residents. Screw the aptitude exam. I think that we put together some of the most competitive candidates in the country. The people who walk through the doors on Minnesota Avenue and the Department of Employment Services can compete for those jobs, enter training, can pass the aptitude exam, just like Virginia and Maryland. And I want you to know that I make sure everybody on my team has the same burning desire to make sure that any DC resident that's interested in pursuing a job in elevator mechanic, which we did stand up a program. If they want to be an auto mechanic, which we're getting ready to launch it at Spingarn, we're going to have a whole auto mechanic program. If they want to be a plumber, it does not matter. As long as they have the will and desire, I will make sure my team and I work our fingers to the bone so we can prepare them for an aptitude test. Too many times in history, people have said, you know, there's an academic requirement, you can't do this, they're from this ward, they're from this part of the city. We don't do that at DOES. And I just want you all to know that you have my commitment and my staff's commitment to make sure any DC resident that wants a job, we're not worried about an aptitude test. We're going to get them up to speed. We bring people to the aptitude test. We don't let the aptitude test bring people down. So I just wanted to make sure I say that for the record.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think we are aware that and the item of aptitude tests or just being count to 10 and things like that are call words for really limiting opportunities for certain parts of a community. I'm stuck with what you told me last year. And given the way the economy hasn't really grown, I'm stuck with it. And you said that in the District of Columbia, we probably have 2 jobs for every resident. And that's the reality that we're dealing with. And so how do we get DC residents into some of these jobs when the truth is that more than 60% of the jobs in the city are not filled by DC residents. They're filled by persons who are in the region. And so the district is the regional job center, although we're being challenged by Tyson's Corner and what have you, but we're that catalyst that makes employment happen. And we just want to make sure that our residents have a more than fair opportunity to get them. So thank you. Thank you very much for all that DOES does to do that. I'm hoping that we can do a better job with workforce. We got to speed it up. My pet concern when we talk about workforce is the time frame for the apprenticeship programs. We know today, if you are in the surrounding jurisdictions in this metropolitan area, within 1 year, sometimes fewer than a year or 12 months, and they can prepare you for a bona fide job, a well-paying job. And so we've got to learn how to do that. A 4-year apprenticeship is too long. It's too long. And it keeps you barefoot and pregnant forever, if you know what I mean. That you're locked in where you can only do this one thing and you do it for a century, so to speak. Those old cliches, but really and truly, we want to speed up this process. We have to, and we've heard today about the big projects that we have, and there'll be more. This community is not without opportunities, construction in particular, not without opportunities for IT services, not without opportunities for health services. I mean, these are things that will always be with us. Services for childcare, senior care. These are industries that will continue to be with us. And so with us knowing that, while today was not about workforce, but it is about workforce. Every time we talk to DOES, we're talking workforce. We are very specific about the First Source program. And I just have a question about the conflict in the DC code, the reporting requirements. I think one code 2-219 requires a submission of a quarterly report to the council. And then 219.04 requires the semi-annual report. So we don't get either. So tell me what's going on. How do we get a report? What should we be doing?
I think I've just recently signed off on the semi-annual report. And in my testimony, I certainly share with you the data and the last semi-annual, maybe the last 2 semi-annual reports. So I think it's going through the process, and you should have it soon. I'll ask the team where the last two are at. In terms of the quarterly report, I'm not sure.
If you've ever done that one, yeah.
I don't, in the last.
So you are
several
peering to
years,
the semi-annual.
the semi-annual. In the
Okay.
last several years, I
All
can't
right.
recall quarterly.
So we will expect the semi-annual and do our best to clean up the legislation so that it reflects that.
Please, yes,
So we can get that. Thank you.
got it. Okay. All right, we'll track it down. The last are somewhere around here. We'll track it down.
All right. Does the agency capture data on the number of residents at the same level of detail as hours worked on construction projects worth over 5 million?
Does the agency track
Yeah,
data on the number of DC residents for contracts over 5 million?
yeah,
I think you're speaking to the difference in the.
the two,
Yep, 51%
programs,
of
yeah.
new hires versus hours work percentage. So we only receive the certified payrolls for the hours work percentage contracts. We get data for new hires put into our force system for the 51% new hire contract.
so in other words, a $12 million project where the district government has put in 2 million. What do you receive on that report? What's required to be reported to you?
Yep, so if it's 12 million over 5 million, typically that's gonna be the hours work percentage requirements. So we would get weekly certified payrolls so that we can see what DC residents, where they're working, what the various classifications were of each of those workers on the project, and how many hours were worked. And then we'll track that throughout the project.
So is that where there is 35% of the workers would be DC residents?
So, and it's for each category, so 20% of the journey workers.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. All right, so
Mhm.
that's where we do the average, okay. That's how we got to that number. How frequently does your shop go to one of these work sites where you've gotten this report on this, let's say, $10 million project, and to verify these categories?
That's a great question. We're very strategic about that because there's so many projects that are being monitored at a time. Our goal is to usually get out there at least quarterly. But if it's a project that we have identified as having some issues, or if we need to do more collaborative effort with those contractors, we may go out there more. At a minimum, we're going to be meeting with those developer and contractors who are planning out the staff that's working to make sure that they are considering DC residents that may be in DC networks or any of the programs, workforce development programs that we have, where we have ready to employ district residents that they could be bringing on, or if we need to do a job hiring fair. I think those are more of the efforts that we're looking at to make sure compliance is met.
So how many compliance staffers do you have?
Yeah, so we have a team of 13 for the first source, but doing specific compliance, we have 3 for construction, we have 3 for non-construction, and then we have managers, 2 managers, and support staff.
Okay. Now, what you've said to me of the thousands, okay, almost 2,000 projects that are under First Source, that you have 13 people. Is that adequate? Is that real?
Well, the number is real. Those are real people that are working at 400 Virginia Avenue and out in the field. In terms of whether or not it's adequate, I mean, you know, that's a lot of first source agreements for a person to manage, right? And so I'm always thinking about how can I streamline, you know, the work and make it more, you know, efficient, where there's opportunities to increased staffing and level of effort, I take them. Where there's not, that, we can't. But it's a larger caseload than what I would normally would like to have.
Yes, I guess that's what I was thinking a little bit about. And also thinking about the upcoming projects,
Yes.
which, I mean, if we're talking about 14, 16,000 new jobs in the district, and we want a portion of those jobs, how will we be assured that we're getting them? That's what concerns me. And 13 staffers that are already doing 1,000, I think it's 1,600, I believe, from your testimony. This is 1,600 projects because you have these 1,600 agreements that you're monitoring.
Or they could be agreements on a project, but nonetheless, they're still.
It's over 800 that are non-construction alone.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
so it's a volume. I was just curious. I'm trying to understand this as we move closer to the budget in April, and of course the oversight, which is coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So would like to get have some understanding as to what transpires weekly in one of these workers' schedules.
You want
How do they get this done?
to talk through a little bit about the day in the life of a compliance specialist and their
Sure.
workload?
Yeah.
Yeah, so especially in our first source compliance team, there's a heavy focus on outreach and education as well. So we need to make sure that contracting agencies are aware of how first source works, the process that we need to receive agreements after they determine who the contract winners or bid winners are. And then we're also doing outreach and education to those general contractors and their subs to make sure they understand the reporting that has to go along with it. So we have a team that is managing the agreements that are flowing into our office and making sure that all of the signatures get done and that they're posted on our Forest website and things like that. And then there's also a group that is working on the outreach and education. And a lot of those same individuals are also following up for the monthly monitoring reports. So a lot of those monitoring reports can be received via paper. So we can look at the numbers that are being reported. And then it's more of a spot check. So we'll have to schedule our time to go to a work site or to request follow-up information from contractors at various projects. And then we have to remember too that these projects are not ongoing continuously. They have seasons. So you want to be able to catch a project on site when they're out there doing the work. And then there's some contractors are out doing work at one part of the construction season. And then there's other contractors that are out doing work at a different part of the construction season. So we have to be very strategic in our approach to make sure that we're covering the whole spectrum of those projects.
Are you kind of explaining to me that much in the way of a building inspector is on the job doing a construction, you would have like an inspector that comes out, make sure that the foundation is to standard, then would do the drywall to a standard. Are you suggesting that your compliance work is at that detailed and it would be related to I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
these seasonal projects, or how does that work?
Yep. So you're going to do the scaffolding at one part of the project. We want to make sure that we're going out to see the subcontractors that are doing that work. But we'll be receiving their reports in our system, so we can review those from the office. And then at another part of the project, there's going to be a group that comes in and does the plumbing. It's typically not going to be done at the same time. You're going to have another part of the project where they're doing the electrical work. So as we hit these different phases of the project, we want to make sure that we're at least doing a spot check, that those contractors know what reporting needs to be done. that they're making what we call good faith efforts towards hitting the first source goals and making sure there's education provided to them about how to go about those good faith efforts and how to provide us with documentation of those efforts when we do our closeout reviews.
Okay, having talked with some of the construction community, I am aware that the majority of their new hires naturally are common laborers. Okay, so they may be doing these different tiers, but is the common labor involved when you're doing plumbing and when you're doing electrical work? They tend to be those who are doing the cleanup or the ones who get the bucket of cement and bring it
I
to
call
a
it
location.
environmental services.
Yes.
Versus cleanup, but yes,
Okay.
I mean, generally they're the non-skilled trade jobs.
Correct,
Yes.
correct. So are you suggesting that when the trade is plumbing, that that their report would also show non-skilled labor as a part of that process?
Yeah. And yes.
I
But
see.
again, we have to look at the type of projects that we are monitoring. So to give you some examples, I can dig into the numbers a little bit. I think it'll help share the picture for you. On our hours work percentage projects that we did compliance for last year, the majority of the hours worked on those projects were actually by the journey workers. So more than half of the hours worked by district residents were actually doing journey work, and only a quarter of the hours worked were done by the common laborers or the skilled laborers. So it's kind of flipped from what you've been hearing from the construction industry. From what we've seen, and this is year over year, the majority of the wages earned by district residents and the majority of the hours worked on those projects are by either journey workers or apprentices.
Okay. And your on-site compliance officers, they can verify that that is what happens.
Yeah, so again, we do a spot check. We receive the documentation of the reporting, and when we go out on the sites, we'll look for a specific employee or a contractor to say, okay, is this person actually out here working? And so we can say yes or no. But it's more of a spot check. The bulk of the compliance work is done through the reporting, either through the certified payrolls on the hour work percentage project or through the FORCE system for the 51% new hire project.
All right. And that was the nature of my question earlier about what happens when you should have 10, but you end up with just 2, and how do you compensate, or how is it compensated for in the documentation that you receive? Is it honest what we're receiving? So just wondered about that. Does DOES contract with any training providers to help get more district residents licensed and certified to be a part of maybe the world of journeymen or apprenticeships?
We've done grants for the pre-apprenticeship programs. Let me see, Mr. Lewis Brown, he'd be proud of me. I think it might be the Step Up program, but we've done grants. I think we did a grant with one of our union partners, not any contracts, but just grants to support pre-apprenticeship to build skilled labor.
Okay, so as we all know, the unions are very effective at this. They have these programs set up out in the county, as it's called. Those who come to the American Job Centers, do we have groups that leave the job center and go to these apprenticeship programs, or?
We do have some. I have been part of some conversations recently about how we can support unions setting up shop to offering those trainings here in the District of Columbia. Looking at the DC Infrastructure Academy, because we're going to be opening sometime this spring at Spingarn as potential host site. So we want more. We want more here, not necessarily leaving to go out of the city.
Yes, yes, I know. And those are programs that are necessary. Have you also been engaged with the unions about their apprenticeship programs, not taking 4 years, 6 years, but maybe 2 years?
I have a very strong apprenticeship team. I would say the best in the country, and most definitely in the region. They are always speaking to unions, always about apprenticeship. I think that they would tell you that there are models that a multi-year apprenticeship could work. And there are other labor categories where a single year internship would work. I think what we need to do is figure out, the investment that we could make and where we want to push on a single year or less versus a multi-year. My guess is that some of the more advanced skilled trades probably take more than a year, is my guess. But they are always talking to unions, and I know that they've had those conversations.
Have you had conversations with Habitat for Humanity? Because the building of a house does not take longer than the year. And
That is, you have a very good point. That's true. I cannot say with certainty that anybody from my team has not spoken with Habitat for Humanity. I have not, but you're right. It takes them far less than a
Yeah.
year to build a house. Most houses now take far less than a year to build a
oh,
house.
yeah,
Yes.
definitely. I just, out of curiosity, wondered if I know that you're saying that the alternative plans are individualized, but are there any general basics that each contains, or?
Do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So again, we have to first make sure that a contractor is qualified for an alternative plan. And to do so, they need to provide us with an employment plan that shows an actual effort to try to meet first source requirements just by divvying up the work to contractors that are going to be coming on the job. That also gives that GC or developer an opportunity to identify the trades in which they're struggling to meet compliance. So we're first looking for a plan to build the workforce in those trades. So if we're going to give you a partial waiver for the trades where you're unable to meet, what's our plan now to have a future workforce that can meet these opportunities? So we're going to look at pre-apprenticeship. We're going to look at if you can support some already training programs that DOES is hosting or partner with through a grant or if you have your own program that's licensed to provide training, or if you're a part of the union, are you able to help us get some DC residents opportunities to join that union and to be provided training through the union? We're going to look to see if you can take on a higher percentage of apprenticeship than the basic requirements for First Source. If you are doing some type of training or if you're proposing to provide pre-apprenticeship training, well, what's your goal for enrollment for that pre-apprenticeship training? And what's your goal for how many people are going to complete it? And what's going to be your efforts to make sure that that enrollment goal is hit and that completion of training goal is hit? And then after we have this crop of individuals, district residents that have been trained, how many can you help now get hired? Since we have some ready to work employees. So we want to look at all those things. And there's also opportunities for firms to provide a financial contribution towards programs that we already have going, especially those that are working towards the elevator trades, that are working towards our utility trades and the programs that we have through our DC Infrastructure Academy. And then we're also making sure that every position that you have available for work has been registered in DC networks. That's a major part of every alternative plan as well.
Okay. Who has the authority to approve these exceptions that are in the alternative plan? Is that exclusively your bailiwick, Mr. King?
Yep, and we have a team. Our program manager for First Source receives the initial employment plans. We review that documentation together. After we have a proposal received from a GC or developer on what that alternative plan could look like, and we have a consensus, agreement to, okay, this makes sense. We believe that this can move forward. That's when we're bringing in our general counsel or raising it to the director's level for a final approval.
Okay. Does First Source have any responsibility in the execution of project labor agreements?
We do not.
We don't.
So project labor agreements,
DGS is my understanding.
Or whoever
On
the
the-
contracting
or-
agency
Yes,
is.
sorry, that was
They-
specific to RFK, but I think RFK, DGS.
Yeah, most of the school projects that are larger.
It's not DOES.
I hear you. Has DOES ever been involved in the project labor agreement process? You are the labor department for the city.
We are, and not in the last 10 years formally, we have not.
I see. Okay. Okay. Very interesting. So what databases do you use for capturing your information? You say the reports come in, you check for compliance. I think the paperwork, I made a note of paperwork there. A team that does the paperwork, and then there's a team that's out in the field. Which database do you
Yep.
use?
So our force system is where we track and retain all of the First Source agreements that have been executed, as well as reporting for 51% new hire compliance. If it is a larger project, then they have to do the hours work percentage and the 4 different categories of workers. They're required to submit weekly certified payrolls through what we call our LCP tracker.
I'm sorry, it's called what?
LCP tracker.
And the 51% is through, what is
Force.
Forest?
Force, F-O-R-S.
Okay,
Yep.
all
And that's
right,
the same thing that our agreements are
yeah,
received and maintained in.
right. Thank you. So how are penalties calculated?
Yep. It's a direct calculation from the law, 1/8 of 1% of the direct and indirect labor costs of the project. And that, I guess, multiplier is then multiplied for the percentage shortage of the categories for hours work percentage, or for 51%. So let's say you have to meet 20% for the journey worker category, and you only have 15%. We would do that calculation of 1/8 for 1% to find out what the multiplier is, and then you have a 5% shortage, which is multiplied by that multiplier to come up with the penalty. And we would do that
Okay.
for each.
So it's standard.
It's in the
other-
statute, yes.
Okay. So how do you handle the consequences of non-payment when you?
Oh, of the penalty or
Penalty.
fine?
Mhm.
Talk about
Yeah,
that?
great question. There's always a matter of follow-up with the contractor to make sure that they know. We're also informing the developer as well as the contracting agency, who really has enforcement for the overall contract, and to make sure that payment and First Source compliance is met. We also have a strategy of going to DC Clean Hands if there's amounts that have been assessed that have not been paid to district government, we can put you on DC Clean Hands.
Okay. So DC Clean Hands, I think it's that entity that really prevents you from having further interaction with the government dollars?
Yes, it prevents you from doing business with the district
Yep.
if you don't have clean hands.
But the money is out there and they haven't given us our money. How do we get that money?
Yeah, I think our strongest enforcement arm is partnering with the contracting agencies, first of all,
Okay.
because they're the one issuing the benefits to the developer or contractor. So if they are either withholding
Yeah.
funds until they've made their compliance done with First Source, that's a great strategy for making sure that we get those penalties collected.
I mean, I think that there are some also stronger, enforcement. Clean hands is one, certainly. I mean, it would prevent them from doing business in the future or would hold up a payment. I think that there are ways to recoup funds, like through tax returns and filings, and that's part of the clean hands. So there are some enforcement levers that we can pull if folks are not being compliant and we're trying to go after a penalty or fine that hasn't been paid.
Yes, and I was thinking of the Attorney General, who is very exercised about wage theft. So it seems to me this is wage theft indirectly.
Indirectly, wage theft of the government, taking the
Mhm.
government
Yeah.
funds without fully
Yeah,
complying.
that's your tax dollar, my tax dollar.
Yeah, yeah.
And, my neighbors, they get really concerned about that and I have to hear about it.
Yeah,
How are you spending my tax dollar?
yeah.
Okay. So if we had to talk about First Source and what works really well in the current design, that's one way of looking at it. But if we had to look at what doesn't seem to be working, where there needs some tweaking, what should we look at?
I'll take a stab and then Dan, you can offer some insight. I think that we should innovate. I think that we need more flexibility to creatively find ways to both increase the number of DC residents in jobs and to increase the number of DC residents that are being trained. And I think one way to do that that could be better is through the alternative plans and having and allowing for more innovation and more flexibility to do that. I think sometimes some of our GCs and developers have answers to their own problems because they're experts in the field. And so I like the idea of someone pitching an idea to solve a bigger problem, and then we could incorporate that into an alternative plan. But that's only done if we have innovation and the ability to tailor these plans and agreements to individualized projects. So for me, it's more innovation, more flexibility.
Okay.
I agree with both of those. Should be at the forefront of enhancements for First Source. Also, we want to, as a program, just do a better job of communicating. Make sure that we have clear guidance that is provided when we do outreach, and make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of the same set of rules that they're playing by, especially if they're looking to either show that they have some troubled trades that they're unable to meet the requirements in, that they have the same set of rules where now we can look at an opportunity for an alternative plan. And I think we've done good over the last several months, 24 months, to put better guidelines and infrastructure to that, but we're going to continue to improve. We love having the conversations over the year with the groups, the contractors themselves, the DC Bills, DC, to get ideas for what they want to see done better, especially when it comes to communication and infrastructure for guidelines. But innovation is going to be so key with building the workforce for the future. And I see that as the main goal of First Source, to make sure that district dollars are coming back to district residents and making sure that we have a future plan for district residents to continue to maintain a pathway to the middle class and to sustainable wages.
So I'm a business and my project is 10 million and I have 2 million on the line from the district government. Would I be assigned a compliance officer that would stay with me through the life of my project? Would that be a good way of looking at an innovative approach? Or would that cause me to wonder about the conversations and the continuous monitoring, the picky that people sometimes do when I begin to feel like, this person is getting too close and maybe there needs to be a variety. I'm just trying to think how we might look at this better as we are thinking about these big projects. Because when I think about what's going on at the arena, downtown arena here, you have many contractors. We're going to have 6 times as many running around RFK. And if we're going to create, let's say we won't because we know it's project labor agreement, but let's just say we had something like that. Let's just say, for your instance, we would be involved in some of these federal projects, maybe the land turned over to the district, whatever. But my point is, how should we begin to look at the government in concert with the contracting community, the developer community, and the kind of monitoring that we should be doing in order to safeguard district dollars, to make sure that there is compliance. And I'm not thinking 13 people anymore, Mr. King. That seems special, but we, you see where I'm coming from? Trying to set up a potential as to what should we be thinking about? Should we leave it as it is, or should we just?
Well, I can tell you the director has been great with pushing the whole DOES team to collaborate more. And that collaborative effort, the bi-monthly meetings that we have to talk about when the opportunities come available on First Source projects. Well, what is our Office of Talent and Client Services going to do to make sure that individuals that are in DC networks are getting opportunities at hiring fairs? Or how is our DC Infrastructure Academy going to make sure that the individuals that are going into their projects actually have an interest in the training that they're doing, and long-term, they know about long-term opportunities for wages and lifestyle wages that you can earn in construction? And then how are we going to match those graduates to opportunities that are coming up on our First Source projects? So just that collaborative effort and having so many minds thinking and strategically planning, and the apprenticeship office gets involved, and they're looking at both union and non-union opportunities for individuals that are coming through those projects to get jobs and get apprenticeship. So that they can move up through the wage ranks. All of that plays such a huge role in making sure that there's long-term success for the workforce development.
And they're actually more frequent. They're bi-weekly. I mean, every 2 weeks we're getting together, we're partnering, we're strategizing. And so yes, 13 people directly focused on a day-to-day basis on First Source compliance, but the entire agency knows, given our mission to connect DC residents with jobs, that this is an agency mission, problem, and solution together.
All right, well, thank you very much. I guess I'm also thinking about First Source also, I guess, looks at not just contracts, but grants and loans and tax abatements, land transfer for redevelopment, that's a big swap of what we do. Since much of the district government is done through contracts. And I think about an agency like DACL, Department on Aging and Community Living, and their contracts for food. You know, their contracts with the conjugate meal sites, 42 of those. I'm just thinking there are opportunities that maybe we that are there that they're not the big RFK, but they're nevertheless opportunities to be assured that DC residents have an opportunity to participate. And of course, if we're building an apparatus for training to do all these different tasks, it makes sense. And that's when you'll be thinking about 25 staff and not 13. I got it. Just a little tease there. All right. Well, I do want to thank everyone for participation today, our public witnesses, and of course, our government witnesses and their team. This concludes today's public roundtable. I hope that the public has gained from this, and particularly the contracting community, not just those that are in construction, but the non-construction as well. And I hope that we're thinking about how we utilize our public dollars, and especially through the first source, how we can recoup dollars that may be out there. If any member of the public would like to submit written testimony, please submit it to the council's hearing management system, or you may email it to CEAL@dccouncil.gov, and that's CEAL@dccouncil.gov. The record will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 22nd of January, 2026. The committee's next meeting will be a performance oversight hearing. It will examine the Executive Office of the Mayor and the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs and the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel on the 28th of January, beginning at 9:30 a.m. The committee also will be convening at 11 a.m. on January 31, a Saturday, a opportunity to learn about ranked choice voting, which is the law of the land. The Board of Elections will be making that presentation here in this room, 412, at the Wilson Building at 11 a.m. on the 31st of January, 2026. This concludes the roundtable today. With that, the time is 20 minutes before 3 p.m. on the 14th of January, 2026, and the meeting is adjourned. And thank you again for your patience. Thank you. Thank you.